Jack Parsons got me on the moon. Jack Parsons got me on the moon. The world has changed. I feel it in the water. I feel it in the earth. I smell it in the air. Much that once was is lost, for none now live who remember it. It began with the forging of the great rings. 3 were given to the elves, immortal, wisest and fairest of all beings. 7 to the dwarf lords, great miners and craftsmen of the mountain halls. And 9 rings were gifted to the race of men, who above all else desire power. For within these rings was bound the strength and the will to govern each race. But they were all of them deceived, for another ring was made. In the land of Mordor, in the fires of Mount Doom, the Dark Lord Sauron forged in secret a master ring to control all others, and into this ring he poured his cruelty, his malice, and his will to dominate all life. 1 ring to rule them all. But then something happened that the ring did not intend. It was picked up by the most unlikely creature imaginable, a hobbit, Bilbo Baggins of the Shire. For the time will soon come when hobbits will shape the fortunes of all. Good evening, good day, good morning, good night, whoever you are, wherever you are, and whatever you are, and welcome to The Velocity of Now, with me, your host, Thomas Sheridan. Tonight I'm going to talk about Enoch Burke and what Enoch Burke represents. Now, I wasn't intending to do a VoN on Enoch Burke, and I've already made some videos already, and I have to say I've never had any problem with his fortitude and his incredible tenacity, but I have an enormous problem with his religiosity. Having said that, I'm putting that aside now for good and judging him completely from this point on what he has achieved. I'll explain later on why I have a big problem with Christianity in Ireland, because I grew up in an Ireland that was basically a horrible place to live in some ways because of Christianity. It's done enormous damage to this island, so I'd be the first to admit that evangelical Christianity of the Burke family has always clouded my feelings towards the case, but I never had any problem with Enoch Burke's fortitude. In fact, I was probably a little jealous of it, because I think all of us who desire a better world, either secretly or overtly, were in admiration of what he did. With the proviso for people like me is that once we don't go back to that horrible old, mad Christian Ireland that caused all the problems. I grew up in that world. I don't want to go back to it. The reason why I'm making the video today, that something truly remarkable has happened. Two members of the disciplinary appeals panel who were hearing Enoch Burke's appeal against his dismissal from Wilson Hospital School in County Westmeath have resigned. The High Court was told that the Department of Education nominee Sean O'Loughlin and Jack Cleary, a child protection advisor with the Joint Ministerial Body for Voluntary Secondary Schools, have stepped down on legal advice. In other words, the case by the state, by woke Mordor, and that's why I began the podcast with that opening line from The Lord of the Rings. Woke Mordor is crumbling, and the most unlikely of people, a young man from Roscommon called Enoch Burke, has become a Frodo Baggins type individual, the most unlikely of people, and taken it all down. And it's hard to believe. It's so unbelievable, but it's hard to believe. But here we are. That is the state collapsing. Why? Because there was a certain point, and I think it was when he first came out of prison and went back to the hospital school, Wilson's Hospital School, that there was a point where a vulnerability was seen in him, that he wasn't this religious fanatic, but a man genuinely driven by his convictions to teach. I think from that moment on, that's when he carried the Sauron's ring up Mount Doom, and eventually he will throw it into the fires of Mount Doom. Now, if you don't live in Ireland, or you've only fleetingly heard of the case, basically Enoch Burke is a secondary school teacher here in Ireland who teaches history and German, and he became a prominent controversial figure, not only in Ireland. He's now, people like Elon Musk have been championing him, concerning a legal dispute, an employment/legal dispute with Wilson's Hospital School, which is a private Church of Ireland that's Protestant boarding school in County Westmeath, in the centre of Ireland, more or less. Now, it all began in 2022 when Enoch Burke, who is an evangelical Christian from a family of evangelical Christians who are all spectacularly well educated, but also very much driven by their evangelical Christianity. As I said, I had problems with that. Objected to using a transgender student's preferred name and the pronoun of they. He publicly expressed his opposition during a school religious service and other events. This led to his suspension in, I think it was August 2022, and the school described what he had done as gross misconduct. Apparently, the students loved him. There's lots of photographs of him with the students, and they're all they said he was a great guy. He's a young guy, and so younger students tend to bond with the younger teachers, and they generally seem to have nothing but good things to say about him. And he obviously seemed to be a very good teacher who loved his job. So to accuse him of gross misconduct because he refused to address a transgender student by these ridiculous pronouns, this happened all at the time when the Saurons of woke were pushing this stuff non-stop. It was really intense. And Irish politicians, being the scumbags that they are, were all filling up their ex-bios and so on with their pronouns, which they've all removed, by the way, which shows you what excrementous dogs run for politics. They have no convictions for nothing. They just do what they think will get them votes, and they're so stupid and so clueless that they thought just because the little upper middle class twats that they associate with were changing their pronouns in a very terribly middle class way, that they assumed that the rest of Ireland was doing the same, and they thought it would get them votes. This is how spectacularly out of touch they are with the people. But they don't even care, because they're doing it for the Saurons, the woke Sauron. So, and that was the One Ring was woke. The One Ring created by Sauron was, or Saurus in this case, was woke, to change society, to change reality. And Enoch Burke was the one who found it and started walking towards Mount Doom. Now, Burke, after this initial thing where they accused him of gross misconduct, he was later again dismissed in January 2023. Then things escalated quickly. This whole thing, well, that escalated quickly. When he refused to comply with a High Court injunction, that's a big deal here in Ireland, which was initially interimed in 2022 and later made permanent, which banned him from attending or even trespassing upon Wilson Hospital School premises while the disciplinary process unfolded. And this disciplinary process is now absolutely collapsing like Mount Doom after Frodo threw the ring into the lava. Astonishingly, Enoch Burke kept returning to the school, insisting he had a right to work there and framing his stance as a matter of conscience, religious belief, and opposition to what he calls transgender ideology. Now, if he was working for a private secular company or school, say a state school that was secular, he would not have this right to have a matter of conscience and religious belief, because Wilson's Hospital School is a Church of Ireland Protestant school, so it's overtly Christian, and it's connected and funded through the Church of Ireland, as well as school fees and so on, and grants from the Irish government Department of Education. So the sort of iconography of Enoch Burke started to show up in Ireland, of the guy standing in his work suit with his bag, with his laptop assumably in it, standing at the school gates every day. At first, the media showed up, indirectly portraying him as a lunatic and a loser. And I wouldn't say I fell for that, but my attitude was, well, you took a job. You should abide by the conditions of employment. But the thing was that the conditions of employment, such as these transgender policies, was it a condition of employment, or was it an arbitrary rule just imposed upon the school by the cowardly, well, I said coward, we don't know what the story of the principals were, we'll just leave them out of that for now, and the school administrators. Was it arbitrary? Was it official? And there was things like, you have all the midwits. He became like the clown de jour for all the midwits in Ireland, all the middle class woke midwits. And you'd have St. Patrick's Day parades where they would have floats, like the St. Patrick's Day parade when he was really at the height, the 2023, at the height of standing outside the school, and that image, that iconic image of him standing at the school gates. You had like fellas dressing up like Enoch Burke and appearing in St. Patrick's Day parades around the country and so on, burlesquing the guy. But those of us who know how energy works, what they really do, you want people to attack you. You want people to mock you because you're giving them your life energy. You're giving them energy. Oldest trick in the book. But the midwits are too stupid to, and they all think they're terribly new. Enoch Burke, oh my God, did you see? Like Christian Morris has covered this very well. And to be fair to Christian Morris, he has been a tremendous champion of Enoch Burke. And he's been vindicated. You have to give him that. But the midwits, what makes a midwit is merely following protocol. And they think following protocol and mandates somehow makes them an intellectual. So they're simply witty in their own minds by pointing out that someone isn't following protocol. And a midwit, by invoking protocol, believes that this makes the midwit some kind of intellectual giant among other midwits who chortle and guffaw heartily at jokes about Enoch Burke. It's all terribly middle class. It's all terribly white bread, which is ironic because these woke white types see themselves as the bastions of multiculturalism, of diversity, and yet there's nothing more white than them and their midwit fellow travellers. So they were directly feeding into his persona, his charisma, his magical power. My God, if they were to hear me say that, they'd be very upset by it. Christians talking about magic, but I understand these things. So, from a pagan point of view, that's what was going on. So his defiance, and that's really what it was. In Ireland, there's a nation of cowards, and remember, this all happened around the same time they were finally taking off their masks. The morons walking around with the eyeball on the side of their heads in a state of terror because of a virus that was probably just a regular flu. And they, the whole point of the COVID thing was to make sure that the average normie in Ireland, the average Irish man who might go, we sing songs about this and that was an absolute spineless motherfucking coward, okay? Enoch Burke was a reminder that men don't have to be spineless cowards. And they don't like that. The NPCs and the normies with no backbone don't like that because they don't like being reminded that they were compliant, terrified pussies who put on a piece of face cloth and followed yellow circles around a shopping mall. Now, funny enough, very little of the criticism towards Enoch Burke was to do with anything religious. Very little. I found that quite interesting. In fact, even though I'm not that well known or anything, I was one of the few commentators who actually had the problem with the religion. Not with anything else, but with the religion. And I still do, but I have to put that to one side to defend the man or to understand the man. Now, the midwits were only annoyed and angry and pissed off because he was not following protocol. Because all they can do is follow protocol. They're incapable of free thinking. They're incapable of the kinds who watch the late toy show in their adult onesies. They would never stand up for anything. That's why their wives and girlfriends are all banging some guy at the office. Well, they're chortling on social media about Enoch Burke. while their wives are secretly thinking, I wouldn't mind a fella like him. I'm telling you, that's what they're. Lots of women, and were actually with their husbands were going there. Enoch Burke, guffaw, chortle. Oh my God, what is he like? The more time he stood outside that hospital, I can guarantee you there were lots of Irish women who were going, you know, I wouldn't mind having a go at him. Because they were seeing a real man. A man of conviction. A man of fortitude. A man of bravery. And as a pagan, I say to Enoch Burke, I salute you, sir.